Hi, Kyle. Nice to meet you.
Good to meet you. How you doing?
Good. Kyle, do you know how long these meetings typically run?
Well, today is the most stacked agenda I've ever had. So
Could
it
be a
looks like
while.
you guys are second, so that I would guess the first one's a legislative amendment for a code change that the planning commission's pretty familiar on. So hopefully that shouldn't take too long to get through. Probably not more than 30 or 40 minutes. And then you'll be next. So
Okay.
total, I would, by the time your project is done, probably about an hour and a half, I would guess.
Okay. Gonna let the
Evening,
powers
Kyle.
that be know here.
The chair knows that it's limited to 1 hour for each agenda item, so won't be more than 3.
Good evening, guys. I didn't have a chance to make it into town, so I'm we're going to be working remotely this evening, but I've got the documents here in front of me. Did I see that Amy was not going to be supporting the meeting today, but I think it was Miss Melton or someone else who's at City Hall?
Yes, I saw that, so I think that's right.
Morgan Shelton.
There she is. Thank you, Morgan. If everybody's getting ready to start, I think we've got a quorum at this point, based upon what I'm seeing. Do you count the same, or do we need one more person?
How many do we have?
I see Susie, Jennifer, and Gabe, and myself. I think
Four people is quorum.
4 is a quorum. Excellent. Wonderful. We were going to have some important stuff this evening. So with that said, are you ready to get started, Mr. Jenkins? Or are we expecting any other individuals?
I think we should be good.
Okay. I'll open the meeting. My name is Anthony Stewart. I'm chair of the Carleton Planning Commission. We'd like to take a roll call at this time. Ms. Melton, would you do so, please?
Apologize, somebody was coming inside. Chair Anthony Stewart,
I'm here.
Jennifer Nordstrom,
Here.
Susan Terrell,
Here.
Jim Bandy is absent. Annette Madrid. I do not see her at this time. And Gabe Morales.
Here.
All right.
Thank you, Ms. Melton. If there's any calls for changes to the agenda that would be made now, I don't think we have any. And does staff have anything that we need to adjust or modify?
No, I would just mention that we have a extremely busy agenda today. So I believe Amy mentioned this to you, but let's try to keep each agenda item to an hour or less if possible, so we can get out of here by 9. I don't think we should have any issues with that, but yeah.
Well, we'll go through the entirety of the process we need to, and I
Yeah.
trust our commissioners will give the sufficient, adequate, and happy version of whatever comments they need to have for tonight. We're going to
Yes,
get
and
through it just fine.
And just in terms of public testimony, let's keep it to the 3 minutes and if there is any.
Understood.
Yeah, other than that, I think we should be good to go.
Understood. First thing I'd like to do is call for approval of the minutes from the July 18, 2022 work session. It is in the first couple of pages of this evening's packet. And I was not present, so I could not verify. But if the individuals were present, would like to move to approve, that's all we need at this point.
I move to approve the minutes from the July 18th meeting.
Second.
And do I trust it is unanimous between the three of you that we so vote?
Yes.
Understood. The meeting minutes from the 18th of July have been approved. We, right now, will call for any citizen comments for anything that is not on the agenda. I have a little bit of an echo. Do you guys hear that as well? I think, Gabe, would you mind muting your computer? That might be helpful.
Yes, apologies.
Does this help any better? Excellent. Thank you, Gabe. Appreciate that. Hearing no citizen comments, Ms. Melton, is there anybody at City Hall this evening? Or Morgan Shelton, I may be meaning to say.
That's okay. There's nobody currently present at City Hall.
All right. Having no citizen comments, we'll readdress that at the end if anybody does show up later in the evening. The first item we have this evening is a legislative amendment LA 2022-01 regarding development standard adjustments in the R2 district. At this point, I'd like to open what will be a quasi-judicial hearing. I have a couple of things I need to read.
This is actually, excuse me, this is actually a legislative hearing, so you don't need to
Sorry.
read the quasi-judicial statement. You can just open the public hearing and
Understood. Thank you,
no.
Mr.
cut it a little short,
Thank you, Mr. Jenkins. We'll be getting that again later, I suppose.
sir.
So I'll formally open the public hearing. As I said, this is for 2022 LA or 2022-01 legislative amendment. Do any of the commissioners, does anybody have any conflicts of interest or abstentions, bias, or ex parte contact they need to report? Hearing none and seeing none. Does the audience have any objection to our jurisdiction this evening? And for this evening, Ms. Shelton, unless you tell me otherwise, I will presume there is no clamoring crowd at City Hall. Hearing no objections to our jurisdiction, we'll proceed with our staff report.
Perfect, thank you. All right, so first item on our agenda today is this legislative amendment for the R2 development standards amendment. This will be a recommendation to the city council, either one of recommended approval or recommended denial. As many of you know and have been present for, this is something that we've discussed a few times at the work session, and there have not been any significant changes from what was discussed or presented at that work session. These are code amendments that we hope will make it a little easier to develop smaller lot, mid-sized housing in Carlton. So I'm excited to move forward with this, and I'll go ahead and move forward with the staff report now. So as mentioned, this is an amendment to the CDC development code, specifically related to the R2 dimensional and development standards, but there's also a few other associated amendments, specifically to sections 17.88.030C, which have to do with access spacing, and 17.100.030, which has to do with subdivision lot to width depth ratio restrictions. So I'm going to go through this a little quickly since I've given most of this information at some of the work sessions, but if you need any more, if you need a reminder on any of the stuff that we're considering today, feel free to let me know at the end. This is really in response to staff's finding and analysis of the development code, while also hearing some feedback from developers themselves that the city's current R2 development standards don't really serve their purpose, and that they don't allow for feasible, economically viable development of what the state has called middle housing. So what we're talking about middle housing is typically anything from duplexes all the way up to cottage clusters. In the case of Carlton, we're really just talking about attached single family housing or townhomes in this sense. So this is the buzzword middle housing is probably a lot of you guys know came as a result of Oregon legislature passing House Bill 2001, 2003, and 2019, 2020, which really emphasized the need to increase this middle housing in Oregon to address the housing crisis. You know, after reviewing Carlton, being here for a few years, and going through a few different subdivision applications with the city, I noticed that our R2 code doesn't really support some of the stuff that some of the actual permitted uses in the zone. Specifically, we're talking again about townhomes and duplexes, and other types of smaller lot single family. And this was mainly because the lot size, the lot width, lot coverage, access spacing, and width to depth ratio restrictions made it pretty financially infeasible for a few different reasons, both on the buyer side and the seller side, to make these townhomes and other types of attached housing makes sense from a developer or a buyer standpoint. So we've had a few different work sessions now where we've discussed some of the specifics with regards to these amendments. This is the first public hearing in relation to hearing those amendments. So again, excited to get going on this, and I'm going to go through some of the criteria and findings of fact. For development code amendments, the city code actually doesn't list any specific criteria, but as is typical and standard for any legislative amendment, the applicable goals and policies of the Carlton Comprehensive Plan, as well as statewide planning goals, are used as the criteria for these amendments. So goal 1, citizen involvement, specifically to maintain a CIP, which in this case means citizen involvement plan, not capital improvements plan. That ensures the opportunity for citizens to be involved in all phases of the planning process. The original work session was open to the public on the 20th and posted on the city website regarding the proposed amendments. All property owners of property zoned R2 were given Measure 56 notice, which means that they were sent the state required notice of this potential development code amendment. And then obviously tonight we have the Planning Commission public hearing, and then next month we'll have the City Council public hearing as well, which will also be properly noticed in accordance with all of the city and state notice requirements. Policies 2 and 3 specify the need again to involve citizens in all phases of the planning process. I just went over that. And then number 3 is the city shall conduct all hearings leading to a land use decision as quasi-judicial hearings. This is not a quasi-judicial hearing. It's a development code amendment, so this is not applicable in this sense, but all future development applications will be heard and are heard in accordance with the quasi-judicial process. Goal 2 is land use planning, which essentially just states the need to maintain the land use planning process, which is what we are doing by hearing this amendment. So that goal is met as follows. And then goal 10, which is really the important one here, which is goal relates to housing. The city's goal 1 of housing goal 10 is to develop a variety of housing opportunities to meet the needs of all present and future residents at the lowest possible cost and with the highest possible standards. Specifically, policy 1 states the need to, or the requirement that all new developments shall only be permitted when all urban services become available, which is always the case in Carlton, will continue to be the case as dictated by our public works and city engineer. Policy 2 states the need to conserve and improve all structurally sound existing housing stock in Carlton, which is not applicable to the proposed amendments. Policy 3 states the need to include variety of infill housing types within the appropriate density and design standards, which this is actually going to have a hopefully large impact on in the sense that reducing lot size and lot width makes infill development substantially easier for property owners, because infill development is obviously on, frequently on smaller lots that have both infrastructure and natural constraints within the urban core oftentimes. And honestly, the majority of this type of development, the townhome mixed density housing that we've seen has been within the city's urban core as well. So while this also applies to land, it's not within, it doesn't have infill potential. This is a good step forward in helping infill development occur. Policy 4 has to do with manufactured housing, which isn't applicable. And 5 has to do with federal and state funding for housing rehab, which is also inapplicable. 6 is really where we get in to Carleton's policies here. And this is really shows the need for these type of amendments. Specifically, 6A states that all residential development shall conform to state building, electrical, plumbing, and fire codes, which we always do in review, and also reduce the land needed for residences and facilitate the provision of public facilities in an efficient manner, which again, we hope this will, by creating these smaller lots that will allow the existing services to serve these smaller developments more efficiently, rather than having to be extended through, to the farther reaches of the city through these kind of larger lot development. 6B states the need that, or states the goal to encourage a mix of housing types, including duplex development within new subdivisions and residential PUDs, and make sure, until the housing mix more closely resembles the preferred ratio of 75% single family to 25% multifamily. So this is really the policy that's most drastically affected by the proposed change, in that over 90% of the city's current housing is single family. So while this is still going to be mostly single family, and that townhomes are oftentimes single family, we're really moving closer to that, attached single family into that multifamily zone that the goal specifically calls out here. So reduce lot sizes and lot widths always make it more economically viable for developers to build more affordable homes with those mixtures of housing types. 6C, again, varying lot sizes and configurations shall be encouraged in order to provide for a variety of housing types, densities, and designs. So again, this is something that's directly affected by these proposed amendments that will allow the city to encourage development closer to that 10 unit density or 10 unit per acre density ceiling, rather than closer to the lower end of the range in the 4 or 5, which is really what we're looking to do. So again, the statewide planning goals, a lot of these have some overlap in the ones I just read for the Carleton policy, so I'm not going to go over those in any more detail. But the amendments are attached as exhibit, I believe it's A or B to your staff report. I think there's only one, so I believe it's exhibit A. So with that, and based on those findings, staff recommends that Planning Commission recommends approval of these amendments to City Council. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Jenkins. At this point, we'll just follow the next steps in the public hearing procedure. And that will be, because we don't have necessarily an applicant's report, we'll just open this to public testimony. If individuals would like to speak as proponents for, now you'd be the time to raise your hand. Other than, of course, staff. Same thing for anybody opposed to the proposed modifications in the public here this evening. If you're in Zoom land and we can't hear you, and you jump in a few moments, that's okay. Are there any individuals who would like to speak in a neutral fashion as part of the public testimony this evening? All right. Seeing as how we have no public, I'll open this up to the commission for any conversation at this point, questions to staff, and any questions about any. Do we have any public agency comment or anything to add, Kyle?
We did not. We've submitted, or I have submitted, the amendments to the Fair Housing Council of Oregon, and they will provide comments at the City Council level. But preliminary response was enthusiastic from them, and we haven't received any other comments other than that.
Okay. Well, I think we can just ask you some questions. If we have nobody here from the public, I can close the public testimony portion of the hearing. I think I should read that language. Correct, Kyle?
Which language?
Just to continue or close a public hearing language.
Oh, yeah, you can do that.
ORS section 196.763 paragraph 6A states that upon request, commission must either grant a continuance for no less than 7 days or hold the record open for no less than 7 days to permit any participant opportunity to provide additional testimony, argument, or evidence. There's no continuance that's been requested, so the public hearing is now closed. And I will open this now to the commission for any comments on these proposed changes. Susie, Gabe, Jennifer. I can start and simply say that I think affordability has been a repeat topic in the meetings for the comprehensive plan. This seems to be a workable method to attempt to address it. Similar comments have been made about hesitancy to expand the UGB or spread outward further, and this seems to also meet that concern. And that I appreciate this is incentivized for new infill development. The next couple of years will provide an answer as to how successful this is. But if we can replicate some of the plans that have been either submitted to the city and are being undertaken right now, or the ones that have been proposed, I think that'll be helpful. And we can circle back on this in a couple of years if need be.
Great. And the only thing that I would add before you guys move into your discussion is that with any kind of amendments that are relatively new, there's going to be things that occur, with a development application, if should this get approved, that bring up the need for further amendments. And fortunately, we're in the situation where we do have that comprehensive plan and development code update upcoming. So one of the nice things about doing this prior to that is that hopefully if we do receive an application in between those two, we'll be able to kind of review and see if those code amendments achieve what what the intent was. Oftentimes there's going to be, unintended consequences, maybe parking or something like that then we can address as well. So I think it's very positive that we're doing this now. I think it'll allow us to not only do what we intend to do with, making housing options more diverse, but also give us a little look into, what might be needed to be done in a future comp plan or development code update. So I think this is been a really positive process, and it's good we're moving forward.
Commissioner Nordstrom, do you have any comments or questions?
No, I don't think so. Given that this is we've seen this before, I think most questions were answered previously.
Ms. Terrell?
No, I'm excited to send a message to developers that we're enthusiastically behind diverse housing, and that we're really interested in keeping our urban growth boundary preserved for as long as possible. So I hope this achieves that, and I'm really appreciative of Kyle's work on this. Thanks, Kyle.
Mr. Morales, any thoughts or comments? Otherwise, we can proceed.
Nope, I think you guys cleared it up. No comments today.
Thanks, Gabe. Well, we have staff recommendation, I think, in this thorough document. I think all of our questions have been answered. Is there any other comment? Otherwise, I think, at this point, we could accept a motion for approval. I think we've done everything we need to do.
I move to adopt the findings from the staff report and recommend the City Council approve LA 2022-01.
Second.
All right, hearing a motion in a second. Again, that was, you were citing the Planning Commission options A as your motion, correct, Ms. Susie?
I highlighted which one I think. Yeah, I think that's the one.
I didn't have it right in front of me. I want to make sure I was just saying that I didn't.
It's the first one, yeah.
The first one, understood. We'll hear all in favor of Susie's motion, Planning Commission option A from page 37.
Yes,
Aye.
Aye. Mr. Morales?
Oh, I said aye. I think I just got caught behind someone.
Understood. That's okay. 4 ayes. The motion passes. We are recommending that this be submitted to the city council for essentially passage, 2 readings. Is that correct, Kyle?
That's correct.
Understood. All right, I think we can move on to our next agenda item. Do you need anything else on this, Mr. Jenkins? All right. Now, these ones, we are going to do quasi judicial, so I need to read a few things. The next matter on our agenda is the site design review for 213 North EM Hill Street. Kyle, can you read me the number? I've got my different screen up.
So it's SDR 2022-01, and it's accompanied by a conditional use permit application CUP 2022-01.
Thank you, sir. Purpose of the hearing today is for that site design review. Do any commissioners have any conflict of interest, abstentions, bias, or ex parte contact you'd like to report at this time? Seeing none and hearing none, and I have none myself. Are there any audience objections to our jurisdiction? Hearing none or seeing none, I think at this point I need to formally give our hearings disclosure statement. All persons testifying shall be deemed to parties to the application and must provide their name and full mailing address if they wish to be notified of the decision, continuances, appeals, or other procedural actions required by the code. The city zoning code specifies applicable criteria to be relied upon in making a decision. Those criteria and findings of fact are in the city staff report. Public testimony should be limited to those criteria and findings of fact or to other city or state land use standards that the person testifying believes apply to the proposed land use action. Failure to raise an issue in person or in writing with sufficient detail to afford the hearing body and the parties to a hearing an opportunity to respond to that issue precludes appeal to the land use board or to seek damages in circuit court due to a condition of approval. Before the conclusion of the initial evidentiary hearing, any participant may ask the council for an opportunity to present additional relevant evidence or testimony that is within the scope of the hearing. Hearings body shall grant the request by scheduling a date to finish the hearing, a continuance to a time and date certain, or by leaving the record open for additional evidence or testimony. The order of proceedings are generally as followed: required statements, staff reports, applicant's presentation, those in favor, those opposed, neutral testimony, rebuttal by the applicant, request for continuance or leave the record open, close the hearing, close the record, deliberations, and decision. At that, I will now introduce again Mr. Jenkins, who will bring us the staff report.
We do the declarations yet? Did I miss that?
Which declaration of interest?
Yeah.
Yes,
Yeah,
there
okay.
none
Cool.
were reported. Thank you, sir.
All right. So agenda item 2 tonight is a site design review and conditional use permit, SDR 2022-01 and CUP 2022-01. This is for a site design review and a conditional use permit for essentially a redone SDR and CUP for an original approval from 2015 for the Dusky Goose Winery. The applicant is Lawrence Farrar. Size of the property is just under an acre, and this property is split zone, commercial business, and downtown district wine gallery. Geez, can't pronounce that. Exhibits to your staff report. Exhibit A is the vicinity map. Exhibit B is city engineer's comments. Exhibit C are the site plans. Exhibit D, conditional use permit narrative. Exhibit E is the decision, the original decision from 2015. Exhibit F is the narrative for the site design review, and Exhibit G are the architectural details. Review criteria are 17.152, which refers to conditional use permits, and 17.156 is site design review and the associated standards. So just to give a little bit of background, just to clear this up, I know it might be a little confusing from the background, but In February 2015, the Planning Commission approved land use applications SDR 2015-01 and CUP 2015-01, which allowed for the development of the Dusky Goose Winery on the downtown wine gallery portion of the split zoned lot, as well as the associated and parking and accessory uses on the commercial business zone portion of the lot. After receiving this approval, the use was developed and issued a business license by the city without completing the conditions of land use approval. So because the initial application did not comply with the conditions of land use approval, primarily the need in this case to complete the pre-treatment for sanitary sewer on the site for the winery use, the applicant, which is now under new ownership, or the property which is now under new ownership, has submitted a new SDR and CUP application to make sure those criteria are addressed and to regain that initial land use approval. So specifically, the proposal includes a request for the Planning Commission to reapprove the proposal submitted under SDR 2015-01, CUP 2015-01. The site currently contains the existing winery building, which includes a tasting room, barrel room, and winery room. The proposal also includes a slight redesign of the required parking, an access drive along with a new warehouse and barrel storage warehouse space and some associated landscaping. It should also be noted that the city has permitted the property owner to move forward with the pre-treatment on the site per the city engineer and public works department recommendation, which again will allow the use to move forward under city public works design standards once that land use approval is obtained. So again, there are some slight modifications to the site from that original 2015 approval, but really the intent here is to go back, conduct a re-review, but also to make sure that those conditions are in place and applied for because that original approval expired. So in terms of process, major site design reviews and conditional use permits are both type 2 quasi-judicial actions. Public notice and public hearing is provided. An appeal of type 2 decisions are to the city council. The application was originally submitted to the city on April 15th and deemed incomplete on May 2nd. The applicant resubmitted the application on the 29th of June, and the application was deemed complete on the 20th of July. The city has 120 days or until November 17th to approve with conditions or deny the application. Notice of the Planning Commission hearing was mailed to the property owners within 300 feet of the subject property on the 26th of July, which is exactly 20 days prior to the date of today's hearing. Because this is on Yamhill Street, ODOT was notified, so comments were received from both the city engineer and ODOT, which are attached as Exhibit B and referenced throughout the body of the report. Applicable criteria for a major SDR are located in CDC 17.156 as follows. Criterion A requires conformance with the general development standards, specifically chapter 17.60 through 17.104 of the development code. 17.64 speaks to street standards and summarize the city engineer's comments here. Yamhill Street is Highway 47 along this stretch of property. The requirements are 65 feet of right-of-way, 50 feet of pavement, curb and gutter, and a 6-foot sidewalk. There's currently a curb and gutter and a 5-foot sidewalk, and the pavement is approximately 30 feet. The right-of-way also varies along Yamhill Street. In this sector along the frontage of the property, it's 50 feet. Just south, it's 55 feet. Just north, it's 60 feet. The important thing to consider here is that because ODOT is currently in the design process for an alternative route for the highway, as I'm sure most of you are familiar, that would impact this frontage. There's no design as of yet. So the comments received from both our city engineer and ODOT's Region 2 representative recommended approval of the location of the current driveway and also the deferral of potential improvements until that side of the highway or that part of the highway is fully developed and the plan has been fully developed. So the recommendation from both of them is to defer the required improvements until that plan is in place, and then review once that plan is replaced. So that's why in the staff report it recommends keeping as is rather than requiring the initial original or the further dedication of right of way along with well, mostly just that dedication of right away. I also included those ODOT comments in there as well, specifically again, the project to realign Highway 47 through Carlton and the impacts on the site. Because the design isn't completed yet, and it probably won't be, and construction isn't completed, estimated to begin until 2025, which is probably optimistic. A change of use is not triggered, and the driveway, which is existing, can continue to be used, and that they recommend that the city not enforce the frontage improvements because of the potential of those improvements having to be ripped up as the result of the realignment project. So that's kind of the important information with regards to the highway and the frontage requirements, if you're confused of any of those, but I'm happy to answer any questions as well after completing the staff report. So moving on to parking, which is in 17.68. Because this is in the downtown parking district, off-street parking is not required as enumerated within the normal parking chapter. However, the applicant has calculated and provided off-street parking as required by the provisions of 17.68 and are as follows. Specifically, winery production, the building is 9,785 square feet. The requirement for winery is one per 5,000 square feet, which means 2 spaces are required. The tasting room, which is 570 square feet, and the office mezzanine, which is 300, total 870 square feet, which requires 5 spaces. There are 4 employees with the requirement 1 space for every 2 employees. 2 additional spaces are required, which totals 9. 10 spaces are required, including 3 in the front, and I believe it's 8 in the back, 2 in the front, 8 in the back, including 1 ADA accessible spot as well, which meets the code requirements, even though in this case, off-street parking isn't technically required. Moving on to landscaping and screening requirements. Parking lots require any kind of lighting to be directed away from vehicles and neighboring residential uses, which is listed as a COA. Screening abutting property lines requires commercial parking areas to be screened by a 5-foot landscape strip. Again, parking access areas abut the front portion of the southern property line, which, while a commercial use does not, or because it is a commercial use, does not require that additional buffering. However, staff has recommended that a condition of approval be applied to require a landscape strip of 5 feet along the northern property line, which is currently undeveloped. C has to do with landscape standards, which are all required to be met as a condition of approval. Specifically that the 8 required, or the 8 proposed parking spaces on the rear of the property, but proposed buildings, and therefore do not have the room for the landscape strip. The 2 spaces on the front of the building have a proposed landscape buffer between the parking area and Yamhill Street. And landscaping will also be required on the south side of those 2 landscape, or on the two parking spaces out front as a COA, and landscaped as required by subsection C. Bicycle parking, 2 bicycle parking spaces are required at a minimum and will be required to be placed on site as a condition of approval. I'm going to run through or skip over the storm drainage, utility lines and facilities, and water service and sanitary sewer. But again, those are pretty expressly spelled out in Gordon's comments as well as in the staff report. Normal site and landscaping design are applicable as determined within the standards of the downtown district, specifically subsection N, which requires landscape proposals to be compatible with the downtown and expose or have front areas compatible with the streetscape. In this case, the site is already developed. There is a little bit of required landscaping that is listed as a COA, but staff finds that the proposed design is functional with the downtown streetscape. And as, like I said, as a condition of approval, a 5-foot landscaping strip shall be required along that north property line. For the downtown wine gallery, 10% of the total site, which can include the street trees, which are not included in this case, but they can be, are required. The total area of the site is just over 42,000 square feet. And the applicant has proposed 4,400 square feet of landscaping, which exceeds that 10% minimum. And all landscape areas will be maintained by the property owner. Screening and buffering. Screening is required for parking areas, commercial and industrial uses when abutting residential uses. While there are no parking areas for 10 or more vehicles, 20 more vehicles, excuse me, for a commercial use, so that section is inapplicable in this case. Screening is required along the portion of the south side of the property abutting the residential uses. The applicant has included 11-foot landscape buffer along that south side property line, abutting tax lots 1,500, 1,600, and 1,700, and no screening is required along tax lot 1,400 because that use on tax lot 1,400 is a commercial use. Criterion B states that the application of the standards of this title relative to the characteristics of adjoining surrounding uses are complete and compatible. I discussed the landscape buffering requirements and the compatibility with surrounding uses. The site is within the city's commercial zone on the backside and downtown wine gallery sub-district on the front half along Yamhill Street, both of which are commercial zones, commercial designated zones. Again, adjacent sites are vacant to the west and to the north. There's a commercial use directly to the south along Yamhill. And then there are residential uses that are technically non-conforming, they're legal non-conforming residential uses south of the backside of the commercial zoned area on this lot. So I know it's a little bit confusing. Hopefully the map was helpful. But essentially, because of the zone and the existing uses as well as the proposed buffering, staff finds that the preliminary plan is compatible with those surrounding uses. Criterion C speaks to drainage and erosion control requirements. Gordon's comments in Exhibit B explain the requirements and needed elements to be met as conditions of approval. So whereas last time these were not reviewed for some reason before the building or the business license was permitted, there will be a required pre-construction meeting with the city and submitted construction plans to ensure compliance with these conditions of approval. Criterion D speaks to public health factors. There are no existing unmet public health standards at play here. Future construction of the storage building with the applicant has indicated will be down the road, will require compliance with all applicable building permit requirements. The proposal also includes the addition of a pre-treatment system to mitigate impacts on the city's sanitary sewer system, which was a big deal for our public works department and city engineer in terms of reducing the negative effect on the city's sanitary sewer system. So that's certainly a benefit of moving through this application again. I already discussed criterion E, which has to do with parking, and criterion F, which has to do with noise and visual buffering. And then there are no natural features on the site. So criterion G is inapplicable, and H speaks to natural hazards, also which are inapplicable because there are no natural hazards on this site. So moving on to the conditional use permits, which can be found under on page, I believe it's the packet in my staff report are always slightly different, but the conditional use permit starts with the bold heading conditional use permit criteria. And the reason why a conditional use permit is required here is because while wineries are listed as an outright permitted use in the wine gallery sub-district of the downtown district, they're listed as conditional uses within the commercial business zone. So this is really just a technicality that we wanted to make sure was, given full approval. But this site is split zone, which again means that half the property is that commercial business and half of it is the downtown district. Therefore, we need to move forward with the conditional use permit criteria. Criterion A states that the use must be listed as a conditional use in the underlying district, which it is within the commercial business zone per CDC section 17.32.030Q. Criterion B speaks to the site size, dimensions, location, topography, and the adequacy of those elements. Detailed findings were made for those elements under SDR Criterion A. So I'm going to move forward on that. Again, it should be noted that the property is split zoned. So because the winery is an outright permitted use in the downtown district, this is really the backside of this is the commercial business zone. So it's still the same lot, still the same legal lot. And the only element of the site within that commercial portion is the proposed accessory structure in the covered work area, as well as 8 of the 10 off-street parking spaces. So there's really minimal impact. The primary use will be located on that downtown district area. C speaks to public facilities, which I already went over. Criterion D, again, character for surrounding uses, which I've gone over a few times now, as does E, negative impacts. It's an existing use. Again, we're backtracking to make sure that the standards are met and that the land use approvals are in order, but there are no negative impacts of the proposed use on the surrounding commercial or residential uses with the proposed buffer. So based on those findings, staff recommends approval of both applications SDR 2022-02 and CUP 2022-01 with the conditions listed in the staff report. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Jenkins, as always. Appreciate that. Next, we will have the applicant's report and presentation. If the applicant has any information or supplement they would like to present this time, now's the time.
Okay, my name is Lawrence Farrar. I'm with Soderstrom Architects, 1331 Northwest Lovejoy Street, Suite 775. The one clarification I'd like to make is that Dusky Goose was not the original applicant in 2015. That was the previous owner. So I just didn't want to leave the impression that our client was the one that didn't comply with the conditions. I think the main concern we have were in the civil department, and Chris Delorier is here with TM Rippey engineers to represent civil concerns, and I think there were just a couple. Do you want to speak to those, Chris?
Absolutely. Thank you, Larry. My name's Chris Delorier, and I work for TM Rippey Consulting Engineers. I'm a civil engineer, a record on the project. My address is 7650 Southwest Beveland Street, Suite 100, Tigard, Oregon 97223. I saw the conditions of approval, and I just want to make sure that that just to clarify a couple of things, or maybe we can talk about some just slight language modifications. So condition 15 states that the applicant shall obtain easements from the 2 property owners for the pipe and discharge. The easements would be permanent, allow for construction, operations, and maintenance. They would also allow for the discharge flow to cross the property. The easements shall be provided to the city for review prior to recordation. So what I want to do is unlock them from being required to obtain easements or drain across the property to the north. I need survey to do a little bit more research. The city planning maps suggest that the property immediately north and adjacent to the subject property here, tax lot 1300, is actually a right of way or is in a master plan to be a right of way. It's not clear even from county maps, because the county maps actually show that it appears that that strip of land is in private holding, but it's very clear on the city master plan maps that at one point was a right of way or something. It's really confusing. So I want to change that language, and I want to change that sentence to read The applicant will consider finding a public storm line for discharge of the new improvements for discharge, assuming that the existing discharge line and catch basin are sort of, I don't know, grandfathered into its circumstance, or maybe there's an easement on that pipe that is already crossing that section of property. And then if the project is not able to find existing public storm lines, or if extending public storm lines is not feasible within the Highway 47 right away, then the applicant shall either obtain easements from neighboring lots for drainage. And that would be after we consider trying to design, if we can't get access to storm in the right of way, or it's really far away, we would, I think our first attempt would see what is the impact of trying to do 100% infiltration up through the 100-year storm event on site. And then Oregon drainage law allows for cross lot drainage sort of outright. Let me finish going through my comments, and then I'll say something at the end that might be reasonable in this circumstance. So at condition 19, does your name pronounced Keel or Kyle?
Kyle.
Kyle. Okay, Kyle. So condition 19, I just want to make sure we're okay with the language. I read it a few times and I think we're okay. Condition 19 says that the developer and property owner shall sign and record a construction deferral waiver of rights of remonstrance for construction of the street and utility improvements along the north side of the property for future extension of Madison. I'm taking that sentence to mean what I think it should mean, which is the property would generally be responsible for its frontage. In a letter of remonstrance circumstance, typically there's the thought that an LID would be formulated in the future, either by the city or by private landholders. And LIDs typically assign cost to public improvements based off of the square footage that a property has abutting that right of way. And that's usually detailed in the remonstrance letter more. What I want to make sure of is that condition 19 isn't inadvertently imposing frontage improvements on this one piece of property all the way over to Scott Street when there's a much larger piece of property fronting the rest of what Madison would end up being dedicated as, because that property to the west should be also responsible for right-of-way frontage improvements for a right-of-way extension from Highway 47 all the way over to Scott. And true enough, even the properties to the north. So I just want to make sure that the language is consistent, and that this property isn't sort of inadvertently being imposed more conditions or more frontage or right-of-way public improvements than what the state law sort of suggests is allowed.
No, it'll be along the frontage.
Okay, and then the remonstrance documents, they typically specify that they're waiving their rights to vote no against an LID. And then when an LID is formulated, usually the cost is divvied up based off of property square footage, not even improvements on property, just square footage. So I think we're okay with that one. So the only other one was 21. And the only reason I want to be cautious with 21 is because I want to make sure that we have some flexibility on number 15. And I want to make sure that the flexibility on 15 wouldn't cause us to have to come back because of some modified storm drainage configurations. And that wouldn't cause us to have to come back for a revision on the land use case based off the way 20 was written. Okay.
Yeah, so I want to clarify a few things. I think the specific language of these conditions is
Uh-huh.
what's recommended by our city engineer based on the revision. So, or on his review. So during pre-con, you are welcome to have those discussions and propose alternatives. And what really matters is that in terms of the land uses, that all of those applicable drainage standards, as you know, reviewed by the city engineer, are able to be met. So if you're able to work something out with him that is, you know, slightly different than exactly what's currently proposed, or you know, what will work and still meet those standards, that's fine. It's really, these are just when he provides us with the comments and recommended conditions of approval, this is what goes in the document. But if they're all alternatives, you won't have to come back through the full process. That's something that can be worked out at a pre-con.
Excellent. So I will say that I'm still a little concerned about the language in condition 15 if written that way. If written that way, it could be forced on the property owner to proceed that way. That's, and so I do want to be cautious with item 15 and this would be the opportunity to request some either additional language that leaves that open enough, or to modify that language similar to what I had suggested, so that they aren't locked into having to do exactly what item 15 says. I am a little concerned about that as it pertains to giving us the opportunity to explore further opportunities on how to deal with storm drainage. Because given what I know now and what I still don't know, and what might take some time to discover, the storm drainage discharge configuration could get a little more complicated, or it could get simpler. And I want to make sure that we have some flexibility there.
So what I would recommend is, if it works for you guys, is just adding an extra sentence that, you know, can say the applicant may propose an alternative method of storm drainage that the city engineer can, you know, so long as the city engineer finds it satisfactory.
I agree. That sentence, if you add that sentence in, then I would be very that would make me comfortable.
Okay.
That would be, I thank you, Kyle. I appreciate that. And then from there, then I'm okay. So given what we talked about, 21, that sort of stuff, I'm fine with it. So that was my only concern. That's why I'm here tonight. And apologies that we didn't have that detail figured out yet.
Lawrence, did you want to go over the scope, the kind of a general description of the project anymore in any more detail, or are you good to move forward with the hearing?
No, I'm good to move forward.
Okay.
All right, that concludes the applicant's report and presentation. I'd like now to open the public testimony. We're going to have 3 minutes for any individuals who'd like to speak. We'll call first for those who are proponents speaking in favor or in support of the matter that is before us, the site design review and CUP for 213 North Yamhill Street. Ms. Shelton hasn't told me there's a crowd beckoning at City Hall, and I see nobody here. Anybody speaking as an opponent in opposition to this matter? Hearing none and seeing none. Any neutral or undecided? Hearing none, seeing none, we'll move on to questions for the, sorry, I don't have any of them. Any public agency letter, comments, or written testimony you want to supplement at this time, Mr. Jenkins?
Nope.
He is shaking his head no. All right, I'll close the public hearing section of the testimony. ORS section 197.763 paragraph 6 sub A states that upon request, commission must either grant a continuance for no less than 7 days or hold the record open for no less than 7 days to permit any participant an opportunity to provide additional testimony, argument, or evidence. Haven't heard a continuance as of this point. I think we're ready to proceed to our final comments from staff and any recommendation, and then deliberation.
No final comments. If you guys have any questions for Lawrence or Chris, I'm not sure if I may have not heard that we already passed that stage, but if you do, now would be a good time.
Okay, we close the public hearing and the record is now closed. Open it up for some deliberation. Commissioner Nordstrom, would you like to, do you have any comments or questions?
I think, like, I mean, I totally understand the situation with the uncertainty about ODOT's 47 plan and everything. I also understand, kind of as Kyle hinted at, even 2025 may be ambitious for actual beginning of construction. So I guess my one potential clarification would be, like, any, you know, sort of sidewalk improvements that are supposed to happen to be up to code along, especially I think along the Yamhill Street, because I think that that's mostly where the 47 stuff is potentially the issue. I guess I would be concerned that no improvements happen up to code if like the 47 stuff is like pushed out, you know, 10 years, and then, you know, like we're just sitting on this and waiting. So I guess I would like to clarify that it is potentially revisited at the time of the plan. So like when we know what ODOT plans to do, because at that point, it seems like we could sort of say, yeah, okay. And I also, at the meeting on ODOT, it sounded like potentially some of the like main street improvements and stuff might happen earlier. So maybe doing some of those improvements may happen earlier based on what ODOT plans to do. So I totally understand waiting until we know what ODOT plans to do, but I would hope we're not waiting to do any improvements until ODOT's construction is done, unless that makes sense.
I
My
think
question makes sense.
no, that makes sense. No, I understand the concern. I think from my discussions with Gordon and ODOT, their big concern is that if the improvements are required, they're probably just going to be torn up at some point. And yes, that could be unfortunately a little bit in the future. But to answer the second part of your question, the design of that ODOT section will have to be reviewed and you know, done in collaboration with the city in the first place. So it's not like ODOT will just come in and do whatever they want. To an extent, there has to be some sort of, and this is the same for the whole stretch of 47 where that's being, you know, the proposed reroute and all of that has to be done in concert with city standards as well as what ODOT requires. So yes, it's a little bit irritating from this point, but I think that in this case, it's hard to require a developer, an applicant, to do the full scope of improvements, specifically a dedication, when it's likely that that's all going to be torn up. And
yeah, I completely agree with that. And I also hope that what we're recommending is, and I think the word is in there, a deferral rather than like a waiver, right? Like, I don't want us to get to a point where like, oh, ODOT did all this stuff, but you're grandfathered in to have, you know, like narrower sidewalks.
So when they do those improvements, those will all be everything that's required to be done. We've been speaking to a number of other properties along this reroute that are being forced to kind of alter properties essentially. So those improvements will have to be done in compliance with what's approved. They won't get done and then we have to backtrack. It's going to be something that's collaborative.
Yeah, and I guess for the applicants, you know, I know this planning commission in particular feels really strongly about our like 6-foot sidewalks and our walkability and our, you know, and all that in that sort of downtown area. So in whatever ways the landscaping or the, you know, wherever the parking lots go, to make sure there's sort of the future availability to put in those sidewalks so that you're not building something and then like, oh, we can't move this building because you know, it's in the way of, we planned on 5-foot sidewalks. So I guess just kind of keeping that in mind, even if those improvements aren't made at this point, knowing that they probably, like, I know we would all probably say we want those at some point.
Yeah, I don't think anything we have planned would preclude the sidewalks you want.
Yeah, I think kind of, it's easier to know that that would probably be in the future, even if we don't know when the future is.
Thank you, Commissioner Nordstrom. Commissioner Susie?
So I actually have a few questions. On page, I wanted to emphasize Jennifer's point that we will be requiring 6-foot sidewalks at the time of development. That's going to be very, very important to me if I'm still on the planning commission at that time. That's sort of a non-negotiable. So I think in our staff report, it says currently there's a 5-foot sidewalk, and that's not adequate for walkability in our town. So just want to emphasize Jennifer's point on the sidewalks. On page 24 of our staff report, it says that the right-of-way requirement would be 75 feet if this stays highway. And if it becomes a local street, then 50-foot row is adequate. I'm confused why we would settle for 50-foot right-of-way when the requirements are 65-foot right-of-way. And there's a variance along Yamhill Street from 50 feet to 60 feet. So I'm thinking that why don't we go for the larger right-of-way? But that's a point for deferral. So just FYI, that'll be something that I would ask about, a larger right-of-way if it goes forward at that time, those frontage improvements. The other question I had is on page 26 of the staff report, and it says the tree species shall be an appropriate large canopied shade tree and should be selected from the street tree list. We actually had our new street tree list that has not yet been approved by council because they were waiting for the comprehensive plan update. And I went ahead and checked over our current street tree list that is still on record. And there's some trees that absolutely should not ever be put in this parking lot. One is the flowering ash, because we have emerald ash borer right now. So if you could just cross that off your list right now. So definitely not that. The European beech should not be planted there. It wouldn't be suitable for a parking lot. And the trees that would be suitable would be the ginkgo that's specified, or the tupelo, the Nyssa sylvatica, or the ginkgo biloba. So if you're choosing from that specific street tree list that I would say is not adequate, those are the only 2 street trees that would be useful for that parking lot situation. And if you have others that your landscape architect suggests, I would hope that we would bring that back to the city staff and have a conditional approval of those trees, because from the list that we prepared, this commission prepared. So there's that. And the bicycle parking, the 2 bicycle spaces, double thumbs up for bicycle parking. In order to encourage more walkability and alternative transportation, it would be super nice if you could make that covered, since it rains most of the winter here. That's just a request. If you could do some covered bicycle parking, I would appreciate that. And then if concerning your storm drainage, that's a big deal. Storm drainage in our town, we don't want any flooding happening. So I'm hoping that you're using the landscape opportunities for a detention facility. So I'm hoping you're using that maximum landscaping, like for water gardens or that sort of a facility, to really offset your storm drainage impact. And those are my comments.
Thank you, Susie. Mr. Morales, did you have any comments this evening, sir? Or questions for the applicant?
No, I did not. I was curious about the 47 realignment along with the sidewalks, but it sounds like we've got that covered for now.
Thank you, Ms. Morales. I had one question about the landscape strip on the north. The north is CB zone. Is that commercial business, Mr. Jenkins? So you had said before, between this property and an existing adjacent property, because it was commercial in nature, we didn't have to have that kind of buffering in between. So my question was just going to be, is the landscape strip proposed for the aesthetic of this location? Is that the design?
It's
Or is it
intended,
something?
yeah, so it's intended for the actual, the parking lot exterior rather than as a buffer.
Understood. Was it proposed by the applicant in their plans
No,
or the
this
city?
is something that we are requiring, or I'm proposing we require.
I'm just thinking about the practicality of having that buffer that may end up not being as useful. And so I just had a question for the applicant as to the impact on the plans that this would cause. Is this workable with the overall aesthetic? Does it impact the operations, or would it foreseeably impact the operations of the big old truck that I saw that was planning to pull back there?
For the most part, I don't think it would affect it. We may have to double check and see what the trailer swing, if it's gonna, impact the planning.
If there's a minor adjustment needed, we can review that at construction plan level too. I thought it was necessary just because we have that big, there's code language that requires parking lot landscaping that wasn't really included because of the location of the existing parking lots. So rather than go back and, make them change their whole plan on a site that's already been developed before they got into this, this was kind of a compromise in terms of, having some landscaping on the outside where people are going to be driving up and not making them a full parking lot landscaping plan like we might for a totally new development.
And we don't have a problem with it.
Understood. And I did want to go back to the staff report. I think anytime we're dealing with water in our community, it's important to address how we're complying with the code. I understand, Mr. Jenkins, you have shown all your math in our staff report. For the public listening, though, who might listen to this later, I think it'd be beneficial for you just to indicate that all of the activities that will be undertaken at this facility will be subject to city review, engineering review, to make sure, whether it's flow tests or otherwise. It's an important issue in the town, and the more we hit on it, the more people realize if they want to see change, get involved with their city, talk to the city, and participate. I think that would be helpful. So if you wouldn't mind just touching on that, I think that'd be helpful for our record.
Or did you want me to go over the process now?
Yes, just briefly for the record
so-
and for the public listening.
So just for any, this goes for any land use approval under site design review. This is a preliminary plan, what you review, and based on the conditions that are imposed, as well as any minor modifications that primarily Gordon or Brian with Public Works sees at the final construction plan review. Prior to actual physical groundbreaking, the city requires, and again, this goes for not only commercial development, but for a subdivision or anything like that, the applicant is required to submit a set of detailed construction plans that must not only meet the development code and the conditions of approval, but also the city's public work design standards and the applicable state or federal drainage laws or any infrastructure based laws. So this is really, you're at this stage, you're saying, does it meet the development code standards? Do we need to add conditions to make sure it meets the development code standards? And at the construction plan level, Gordon and Brian do a and fire department and ODOT, if needed, do a full construction plan review, which gets more into the specifics of the what's actually needed and the drainage patterns and what, if that's why they stick the conditions on there that then says, essentially, for instance, the applicant shall coordinate with the city on a fire flow test for the fire hydrant to determine if the flow is adequate. The city engineer and fire department shall determine if any improvements are needed. So stuff like that is how we make sure that at the construction plan level, everything is appropriately reviewed by staff and not only matches what was approved on the preliminary plans, but also meets all of the additional public works standards that are not reviewed at the planning commission level.
Thank you, sir. I think we've heard pretty helpful information here today. And I think this will be a really great redevelopment or expansion of this existing facility. I do think that the the comments from the applicant with respect to condition 15. I think the commission should hammer out some specific language. If that is a proposal that staff thinks will be helpful, and it sounds like there was a meeting of the minds there, I think it'd be helpful for everyone to have that proposed adjustment. And then with that, be in a position, unless there's any further comments or deliberation from the commission, be in a position to make a motion with revised number 15. Does that sound like a good plan? So right now, it's the applicant shall obtain easements from the two property owners for the pipe and discharge. The easements would be permanent, allow for construction and O&M. They would also allow for discharge flow to cross the property. Easements shall be provided to the city for review prior to recordation. This is where the applicant, if you'd like to give us any thoughts, or if we just said the language like the applicant may also submit alternative drainage or alternative storm drainage plans that meets the engineer's approval. Is there something more specific than that?
I would just say the applicant may submit an alternative drainage design plan. Final approval shall be given by the city engineer, and the drainage plan shall meet all relevant city, county, and state codes and regulations. And you can just say so motioned if you don't want to repeat the exact.
Okay, since I'm the chair, I don't think I can formally make the motion, so I'm going to let one of my colleagues do that. But the language that is, I think I've got it typed here, that will be addended to number 15 would be the applicant may also submit alternative drainage design plans for which final approval shall be given by the city engineer. Such plans shall meet all state, county, and local regulations. Is that sufficient, Mr. Jenkins? All right. I'll open it to one of the other commissioners if you want to move, and you can just say what Anthony just said, and then I'll type this up and send it to Mr. Jenkins.
So moved.
And to be clear, that was a motion to approve the application with the conditions and conclusions found on page 35, 36, and 37 of our staff report, or of our packet this evening, subject to the modification of the condition for number 15 that I just spoke under the record, correct?
Yes.
Thank you.
I second.
Hearing a motion in a second, we'll take a vote. All in favor at this time, please vote yes or aye.
Yes.
Ms. Morales, that's an aye for you. Mr. Morales, is that an affirmative vote?
Yes, that's an aye. Sorry.
Thank you, sir. And I also vote aye. Ms. Shelton can report it as having passed. I will email this exact language to Ms. Melton and Mr. Jenkins for inclusion in the document to be written up implementing this order. Thank the applicant for their time this evening.
Thank you.
All right, anything else I need to do on that one, Mr. Jenkins, before we get started on our next and final dance?
No, sir.
Understood. Almost there in my packet. Sorry, guys. All right, I'm going to open the public hearing for Site Design Review 2022-02 and the associated variance 2022-01. Found at page 62 of this evening's packet, there is a Planning Commission staff report. At this time, I'd like to announce any or have anybody announce any ex parte contact, abstentions, bias, or conflict of interest related to this matter before us. I have none to report. If you have any report, you can speak up now. Hearing none and seeing none, anybody in our audience this evening object to our exercising jurisdiction over these matters? Hearing none and seeing none, We will move first to the staff report by Mr. Jenkins.
Fortunately, got to go through the whole the whole quasi judicial.
You want me to read that now?
Yeah.
Okay, we'll do it. All persons testifying shall be deemed parties to the application and must provide their name and full mailing address. If they wish to be notified of the decision, continuances, appeals, or other procedural actions required by the code, the city zoning code specifies applicable criteria to be relied upon in making a decision. Those criteria and findings of fact are in the city staff report. Public testimony should be limited to those criteria and findings of fact or to other city or state land use standards that the person testifying believes apply to the proposed land use action. Failure to raise an issue in person or in writing with sufficient detail to afford the hearing body and parties to the hearing an opportunity to respond to that issue precludes appeal to the land use board or to seek damages in circuit court due to a condition of approval. Before the conclusion of initial evidentiary hearing, any participant may ask the council for an opportunity to present additional evidence, relevant evidence, testimony testimony that is within the scope of the hearing. The hearing's body shall grant the request by scheduling a date to finish the hearing, a continuance to a time and date certain, or by leaving the record open for additional evidence or testimony. The order of proceedings are generally as follows: required statements, staff report, applicant's presentation. Those in favor of the application, those opposed, neutral testimony. Rebuttal by the applicant, request for continuance to leave the record open, close the hearing, close the record, deliberations, and decision. Mr. Jenkins with the staff report.
All right. Would you actually mind if I handed this over to Mark, who's been the architect for this project? I think it might be helpful if he gives us the overview of the project and goes over some of the process, and then I can come in with the staff report afterwards on this, if that works for all of you guys.
I'm okay with going out of order, no problem.
All right, great. Mark, I'll hand it over to you then.
Awesome. Well, thank you very much, Kyle. Appreciate inviting me here this evening to present a project that we've been working on for quite some time, partnering with the city of Carlton. I'm sure many of you have seen this project evolve over the years, but just a quick background on the project and our involvement on it. We joined up with the city. Actually, we started the project by partnering with George Fox University students. I'm sure some of you are familiar with that process. We partnered with them to work on a student project to develop a basis of design or a concept design for a proposed city hall for the city of Carlton. That project was really well received. It was presented to city council back in 2019, and an RFP for design services was issued at the time. Holst was awarded the project in the fall of 2019, in which we started in 2020 in earnest. Kyle, did you want me to go over some of the background of the site design, or is the history okay to touch on at this point in time?
If you had a any kind of short presentation that you would have given after the staff report, now would be a
sure. Okay, perfect. Yes, I do. And I'm going to go ahead and share my screen then in that case.
I think you're muted.
I am. Yes, I'm unable to share my screen at the moment. Is there any?
Are you able to
There
share
we go.
directly with our host?
Perfect. There we are.
There we are.
Perfect. Thank you. Appreciate it. All right, great. So where I left off was in 2020, we started the project in earnest, and took feedback from that original student work and developed a new design concept for the city of Carlton and a new city hall. The project back in 2020 actually submitted for an SDR. I'm not sure if any of you were on the Planning Commission at that time, but that project shortly went on hold after that due to COVID and some other outstanding issues. In 2021, the project came back on board. our role was tasked to develop a revised space needs report based on a 30-year plan. And so what you're going to see here today is a little bit different potentially than what maybe you saw the last time the project was submitted. And the fact that it's a slightly larger building to accommodate 30 years of growth within the city and not just for the current constraints of 2019. Additionally, since we've been working on this project since 2019, what you see before you here today is the culmination of about roughly 3 years of feedback through community engagement, city hall, police department staff, as well as city council feedback. So I'm just going to go ahead and flip through a couple of the images here. You guys will be able to correlate these on the packet that we submitted. So sure you all are familiar with this. This is the vicinity plan. The site that the current project sits on actually is 2 parcels. There's a small third parcel as well that's included. It's a small 500 square foot parcel that's part of 143 East Main. The primary site is 191 East Main Street, and it is directly off of First Street and Main Street, cornering those 2 primary streets. First Street is designated as a collector, so we've had to modify some of our design approaches to allow for a new dedication along First Street to allow widening on the road, as well as Main Street has very strict designations on how we approach the site. So from a site plan perspective, we have a little over 12,000 square feet, gross square feet of building proposed. It's all allocated on the southeast corner of the site. The primary goal of this was to activate the corner of North First Street and East Main Street. To the north of the primary building component is an existing police outbuilding used for vehicular storage, as well as a new parking lot that will be developed. Additionally, in that north parking lot, there is a secure police parking area that is for bringing into a secure area to not have any sort of interference with the public and have a visually obscured entry to the police department. Along Main Street, we have a secondary surface parking that is provided. Part of this is detailed out a little bit further in our variance request on the number of parking stalls. But as we work through the project, it was identified that the adjacent building to the west of the project, which currently houses the City of Carlton Police Department, would be demolished in the process of this development. The city had no intention of holding that property or having any sort of historical context to it. And the goal for that property would be to utilize it as surface parking for the City of Carlton City Hall and Civic Building. The main reason for that, as you can see, is there's limited space on the site for parking. And with the amount of vehicular traffic that we expect, just given based off of the needs in City Hall and the new community space, it was requested that we add as much available parking as possible. Great. I'm going to go ahead and go through some exterior views if that's okay. This is the Main Street frontage. So this is the south facade of the building. Within this facade, you can see our very strong materials and very historic materials, which is one of our primary goals of the project, was to blend seamlessly into the historical Carlton precedents. So we're utilizing a weathered aged brick, as well as natural wood materials on the underside of our canopies along the frontage. This creates really an inviting context for the building to sit in. And additionally, there is substantial glazing along the front of the building. Within the railroad district, we are only required to have 30% ground floor window coverage. This is close to Main Street standards. It's roughly 56% along the Main Street frontage. And then on the east, on First Street, it's a little over 30%. But the entire goal for this frontage is to really create the most welcoming and inviting scenario possible by really enlarging the windows along the community room to create open, visible connection between space for the public that's open to the public, as well as a large central entry to the building. Each of these spaces is further identified by the canopies that are provided over the space. We have 5-foot depth of canopies along the entirety of the frontage, and then at the main entry, it's an 8-foot canopy where it goes into the recessed main entry. And this is a corner view looking at southeast, I'm sorry, not southeast, but East Main Street and First Street. This is looking directly into the community room. You can see some of the building rhythms really happening in this view. There's some vertical relief happening just over the windows and the window headers and the window sills, and in between the floor lines as well, where you can see the brick is set back slightly to create that vertical relief. Additionally, there's horizontal banding that's created by expressing that floor line, and that transitions all the way around the corner of the building, which is also represented in the, I'm going to go ahead and go to this view, in the west view as well. So this is as you are coming up Highway 47 and turn onto East Main Street. This is the parking lot that would be adjacent to the property. Lastly, another large design element that was brought into this project as part of our revised 2020 or revised 2022 design off of that Spades Needs diagram is this addition of a very strong cornice line. Our prior design did not account for this, primarily because the building massing was not allowing for it, and that was primarily due to building square footage. We had the prior building was set up with a single-story structure and then an adjacent 2-story structure. By utilizing the Space Needs report and actually having a full 2-story frontage along the building, it allowed us to really lean into those historic precedents and bring back this horizontal roof line and cornice line that really delineates it as being part of this historic Carlton architecture. And then lastly, this is we're going to go around the corner and up First Street, and we're going to kind of look at the northeast corner of the building. You can see there is substantial punched windows all the way along the building, even on the backside of the building as it goes out to the north parking lot. Additionally, there is a large canopy for the north entry into the building. In that north parking lot, we provide accessible parking as well as additional public parking. This is where general public would come to park to come into the building to pay utility bills, etc. We have a reception and lobby just off of this north entry. Additionally, you can see that there's this heavily textured brick is really emphasized here at the large corner. There were prior efforts to look at ways to enliven this, and what actually we ended up with through feedback from City Council was actually to really just lean into that classic brick and let that express itself just holistically. All right, I think that's it for our, oh no, this is the north facade. So this is if you were parking in that north parking lot and entering the building from that direction. And then this is to the right side of this photo is actually the secure entry into the police courtyard. Great, I think that is pretty much it from what we have from exterior images. These are just some quick photos of what you would see for the materials that we are proposing in the project. We have brick veneer. Again, that is going to be a full brick. It's not thin brick that is applied to a cement board. This is a full solid thick brick that's actually set off from the wall. We have aluminum storefront, which we have large expanses of glass along the front entry, as well as at the community room, and aluminum clad windows. So this helps tie in any of the windows that are on the second floor along the frontage to the aluminum storefront to create a seamless look. And then the fencing and screening, we are proposing a metal fencing with screening incorporated into that at the request of the Carlton Police Department. And this fencing will also be utilized for our trash and generator enclosure. Great. I think if there are no other images on this, I might actually just scroll right back up to the site plan real quickly. Just to touch on that, what I mentioned last. So on this west parking lot, a couple of big elements for the project are trash access. We worked with the utility service. It was actually very difficult to provide trash access from the north lot, and it really led to providing access via this west lot for the primary service of that. And within that enclosure, we are able to provide the location for the generator as well. One caveat here, and I have an image here at the end of our presentation, if anyone so wishes to see it. We are originally proposed a pad-mounted transformer as part of the project proposal, and kind of coming in late at the 11th hour from PGE with some coordination that pad-mounted transformer, we're not able to feed the building from that direction because we can't get three-phase power off of Main Street. So it actually will be coming off of First. And that will lead directly into our electrical room, which is located on the northeast corner of our building, which actually is great. So that actually removes the pad-mounted transformer from our site design review. And again, I have an appendix exhibit if you guys wish to see that, but it effectively is just landscaping that takes the place of it. Great. I think that is it from what I wanted to present, Kyle. Is there anything else that you guys wish to see or discuss from the application?
I'll give them, I'm just going to go through the staff report quickly, and then I'll give the opportunity to just kind of have a general Q&A and see if there's any questions.
Great.
One of us will be able to address them, but thanks for that.
I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing my screen then, if that's okay.
Sounds good.
There we go. Okay.
All right. Well, thanks, Mark. I want Mark to give that just so you guys could have an overview of kind of what the site looked like and the images and the exterior and all that. Hopefully kind of clarify some of the points in the staff report. So again, this is a site design review and then accompanied by a variance for the City of Carlton Civic Building. It's a project that has been going for quite a few years now, and that I've only been involved in peripherally for the last year. So I think everyone involved has done a really nice job on this, and excited to see it finally get going here. This is just a remodel with associated parking and expansion of the current civic building, the existing city hall. Includes the remodeling and addition of a two-story, about 13,000 square feet building, of which 9,000 were utilized for the new city hall and about 3,500 for the police department. It also includes the renovation paving of the existing gravel parking lot to the north and the addition of a new parking lot to the west. The existing police garage will be renovated and remain on the north side of the property, and a secure police courtyard will provide space for an additional space for police vehicles to park. The proposed new parking lot to the west will require the demolition of the existing building, as Mark mentioned, and we'll place building and utility services such as a backup generator and trash collection. The staff report indicates that this is 2 lots, as Mark said. Since then, we processed a staff level property line adjustment, which consolidated the 2 lots. So these are now combined as 1 lot. So that was necessary in moving forward with this, so that all of the buildings and the proposed parking are on the same lot. So both of these, as I mentioned, are type 2 actions, quasi-judicial. The application was originally submitted on the 15th and deemed complete on the 25th of July. The city has until November 25th to approve with conditions or deny the application. Comments were received from only the city engineer and are attached as Exhibit B to the staff report. Existing streets require 3-quarter improvements to all existing streets within, adjacent, or necessary to serve the property. Per city engineer's comments, First Street is a collector street, which requires 55 feet of right-of-way, 40 feet of pavement, curb and gutter, and a 6-foot sidewalk. There is a proposed 7.5 foot dedication, additional 11 foot of pavement on the west side, curb and gutter, and a 6-foot sidewalk proposed. Main Street is an arterial, which requires 65 feet of right-of-way, 50 feet of pavement, curb and gutter, and a 6-foot sidewalk. The city, per Gordon, made an evaluation of the street in 2017 and made the following decision, which was to require 60 feet of right-of-way, 40 feet of pavement, curb and gutter, and an 8-foot sidewalk. No additional right-of-way dedication is required. The required sidewalk width is 8 feet, but the proposed is 10 feet to match kind of the downtown stretch there. So the proposed improvements are found to be acceptable. Off-street parking and loading. Again, this project is within the downtown district, and therefore not strictly subject to the off-street parking and loading requirements of the section. But again, because it's recognized that City Hall will and the police department will generate a parking demand, the applicant has calculated the quantity of off-street parking spaces needed and requested the planning commission approve the parking plan as submitted. Per code, government buildings require 1 parking space per 300 feet of building plus 1 per every 2 employees, which requires technically total 48 if it wasn't within the downtown parking district. The applicant has proposed 33 spaces, using the argument that the police department is not open to the public and therefore should not be considered for the parking pod calculation. Just from a personal staff perspective, I find that 48 parking spaces are well beyond what should be required for the City Hall building as the only times that really we're going to see a huge number of vehicles or for public meetings or council sessions or anything like that. We found that the 33 proposed spaces really exceeds the quantity needed for the proposed use and is certainly necessary certainly adequate to serve the Civic Hall and police buildings. Moving on. In any non-residential zone, the parking area can be located off the side of the main building if it's within 500 feet of such site. Off-site parking is permitted as discussed and as provided. There is a public parking facility located 400 feet away that can be used for any kind of overflow parking. And there was a agreement provided to allow for the use of that public parking area down the street in the event that it's justified. Moving on to parking and loading area requirements. There's a requirement to have a 9 by 18 foot parking street and 16-foot minimum 2-way drive. The proposed access is 24 feet in width, which meets the standard. All parking areas will be paved and the parking spaces will be the required 9 by 18 feet, meeting the standard. Parking spaces along outer boundaries of the parking area must be contained by a curb or bumper rail, which is done as indicated on the site plan. For parking lot landscaping and screening, lighting must be arranged to direct entirely onto the parking lot instead of onto the street or onto residential uses, which is currently proposed and included as a COA. Screening abutting property lines for a commercial or government use. In this case, the screening shall be incorporated into the required buffer strip and shall be 5 feet in width. The applicant has proposed a 5-foot wide landscaping strip abutting the north boundary of the subject property, which in turn abuts a driveway that is in between the city property and the residential property to the north. Landscape standards require 10% landscaping plus a ratio of 1 tree per 10 parking spaces. The applicant has included those 13 spaces on site, requiring 2 trees total. 6 trees have been proposed. The plantings will be required to meet those standards, and 12.5% of the total site is landscape, which meets that 10% minimum. Bicycle parking, a minimum of 2 or 1 space for every 20 off-street parking spaces is required. Because there are 33 off-street spaces required, 2 bicycle parking spaces are required and provided as shown. As usual, utilities and storm drainage is covered by Gordon in his comments and also included within the body of the report. Signs, any proposed signage will require a sign permit at the time of installation as required by a COA. Site and landscaping design, Already went over a little bit of it with the parking standards, but the sections or the code is required to be met in accordance with the downtown district, specifically subsection N, which requires those the compatibility with the streetscape and the pedestrian safety, comfort, vehicle areas, shade, etc. Obviously, all of you have seen the existing city hall. There is no landscaping. There is no building up against the property line. There are no benches or anything of like that for pedestrians or anything included on site. So the proposal includes those planters along Main Street, shifts the building up right onto the sidewalk, which is what's required for the downtown district or recommended for the downtown district, and also has the landscaping on the backside along the parking lot. So this is a market improvement from what is currently existing, and also meets the city standard. Moving on, screening and buffering. Screening is required for parking areas of 10 or more vehicles or 20 or more vehicles for commercial industrial uses, which I interpreted to mean government uses as well, which are met, but no additional screening for institutional uses are met or needed. There's the screening that Mark mentioned around the police building and the garbage areas, which is included on the preliminary plan. Access spacing, the city's code, this is one of the many situations where the code is left wanting a little bit. The access spacing table located in subsection 0.030 of section 17.100 does not actually include specific access spacing standards for the stretch of Main Street not located along Highway 47. So in its place, staff utilized the collector street standard as the basis for the review. Collector streets do require 75 feet of access spacing, and the proposal includes only 10 feet of access between the proposed westerly driveway and the existing curb cut, serving the Carlton Dental site to the west, which obviously does not meet that 75 feet. The applicant has requested a major variance to the standard to allow a reduction in that spacing, and I'll go over those criteria under the variance specifics. Criterion B, and then D, E, and F are all discussed earlier under subsection A, specifically to do with the buffering and compatibility with existing uses to the north and to the west. The existing building already meets all of those standards, but the additional landscaping design and buffering will provide a more aesthetically pleasing view of the proposed building, as well as the police department and the parking area. There are no existing natural features or natural hazards on site. There will be some added as part of this proposal, so neither criteria G or H are applicable. I also included, while not specifically called out in the criteria for SDR, for site design review, development proposals are required to, obviously conform to the standards of the applicable zone, including the myriad design standards in the design district, which cover about 10 to 15 pages of this report. So I'm not going to go through every single little design detail, but the applicant did provide a very detailed summary of those standards in response to each, which I then reviewed and provided findings for in those sections. So if you have any questions for either Mark or I about any of the design standards of the district, feel free to ask at the end of the report. Moving on to the major variance criteria. Scrolling down. One second. I can find it. Sorry. Not seeing the variance findings in this packet. Did any of you notice that they weren't in there?
Do not see them as well, Mr. Jenkins.
Well, those should have been in there. Let me just pull them up and I will read them out. I apologize for that. That must have been a oversight on my behalf when I was sending that off to Amy. So my fault on that. Let me pull up the sheet really fast. All right, so again, this is a major variance where the criteria for a major variance can be found in CDC 17.148.14 .050. Specifically, we're speaking to the access spacing requirement here with regards to that 75 feet. Essentially, criterion A states that exceptional or extraordinary circumstances apply to the property. In this case, the strange thing about the code that I mentioned again is that there are actually no standards to obtain a variance from in this case. So we were treating it as a collector street standard. And the issue at hand is that there's an existing drive for that dental property to the west that did not take into account the need for parking on the city area. This is kind of an existing issue. And the proposal we found actually helps alleviate some of the concerns that are currently located there. So really, this is just an issue with the existing location of the building, as well as the necessity of the site itself to provide parking on that west side of the building. So staff finds that constitutes the exceptional or extraordinary circumstance to meet criterion A. Criterion B states that such variance is necessary for the preservation and enjoyment of substantial property right of the applicant. Again, these are driveways that are pre-existing. So in order to meet that, meet the ability to meet other provisions of the code specifically related to parking, building orientation and building location, it's necessary to have that access to provide parking off of Main Street. Criterion C finds that the authorization of such variance will not be materially detrimental to the public welfare. In this case, there is a little bit of concern over the close location of those two entrances, but we found that it was necessary to again provide that service. Again, there's no vision clearance blockages, so there's the opportunity to see the adjacent lot and the existing access. There's also a possibility of having some sort of demarcation there that indicates the need for people exiting the lot to, make sure they check the location of cars on the adjacent lot to prevent any potential issues between the two. Criterion D states that the special conditions and circumstances on which the application is based does not result from the negligent or knowing violation of this title by the applicant. This isn't a situation where there was any negligence. The parking needed to be met. We need to have that access, and this was just really the only way to make that work. We evaluated a few different potential proposals, but this was really the only way that was feasible. And then lastly, that the variance requested is the minimum that would alleviate the hardship. And in this case, this is true. The location is needed to be placed here. The location of that access is needed to be where it is. And the design incorporates the landscaping as well as the sidewalk and the location of the building into the proposal to accommodate that design. All right. And apologies again for not having that in the staff report. I'm not sure how that happened.
All right, thank you, Mr. Jenkins. And I will just state for the record that the verbal findings with respect to the variance that you just read into the record are based on a written document, which will be added to the record for this evening's proceedings. Mr. Jenkins, if you wouldn't mind circulating that to Amy, and we can have that as part of an amendment to an acknowledgement in the meeting minutes for next month.
Absolutely, that'll be in the written notice of decision as well.
Thank you, sir. At this point, I think we've gone a little bit out of order, but we still don't have anybody that's shown to speak for, against, or neutrally about this topic. I think I can close the public hearing at this time, and I'll say ORS section 197.763, paragraph 6 sub A states that upon request, the commission must either grant a continuance for no less than 7 days or hold the record open for no less than 7 days to permit any applicant, or any participant, an opportunity to provide additional testimony, argument, or evidence. Having heard no request for continuance, none has been made, and no request has been made to hold the record open, I hereby close the public hearing, and the record is now closed. With that, I will invite our wonderful commissioners to provide any comments or thoughts. We'll go in the order we did before because it was good luck and it went smoothly. Ms. Nordstrom.
One question is, right now in front of City Hall, there are some electric vehicle charging spots. Is that intended to be included in the new parking lot somewhere?
Correct. Yes, they are. They are located in the north parking lot.
All right, thanks. And then I'm gonna beat Susie to it and talk about bike parking. You know, 2 bike spots, although that's the requirement, I mean, this is a beautiful project, and I like the idea that we are planning for the future growth of the city. You know, I've watched lots of buildings be built. I work at a university, right? They build buildings that they think are going to hold for 15 years. By the time they get built, they're barely adequate for the times. I really hope we are building for the future of Carleton in this building. And I think we would like to see this be kind of a model of livability or what Carleton represents, right? It's our sort of centerpiece of city functioning. And so I think if this is a place for community meetings, if we, you know, if our city staff grows, hopefully some city staff will be living in Carleton and can commute on bikes. So I really hope we can actually put in more bike parking to encourage our residents to attend meetings, to take their bill on their bike, you know, to even think about working at City Hall as a local citizen, you know, by not having to commute by car. So I guess I know Susie will follow up on that, but I really think it sets a tone to have, you know, a reasonable number of bike parking spaces for community participation in city activities. I think those are my 2 comments.
Thank you, Commissioner Nordstrom. Eloquent as always. Commissioner Miss Susie.
I so concur with everything Jennifer said. And I don't even think 4 bike places is enough, because you think of 2 couples cycling and you're trying to park all your bikes there. You already have four people on bicycles and there's not enough room to park. And then you have people parking against trees and that scrapes up the trees and the bikes. So yes, please, more bike parking, and the kind of bike parking that is not just where you put the rear wheel in and then your bike flops around. You need something that you can lean on. So for example, like the ones that are already downtown on downtown streets. And it should be covered bicycle parking, because if we're having meetings in the winter and you want to cycle to the meeting, then you need to have a dry place for your bike. So it's a beautiful building, and I think covered bicycle parking, gosh, you could do a splendid job. I have ultimate confidence in Holst Architects. I love what you've done so far. I love how you've developed the original plan to what it is now. Looks beautiful, but yeah, bike parking was a problem. The other thing is First Street is a collector street, and so it should in fact have bike lanes striped. Am I right, Kyle?
I'm sorry, missed that.
Oh, sorry, I was going on and on. First Street is a collector street, so it should have striped bike lanes.
That's correct. Yes.
Oh.
Sorry, go ahead.
So those will be included, yes?
There should be, yep.
Okay, so can we make sure that's in the language that it is for sure included?
Sure, just include that in the motion.
Okay. And then the landscaping, I would very much appreciate if we incorporated stormwater detention into our landscaping buffer strips. So we have rain gardens there instead of just irrigating things. So I'm hoping that that is part of what Gordon is working on. Is that true, Kyle? Is that part of our stormwater detention plan for that building?
Mark may be able to speak a little better to that than I can. it looks like there are some swales. I'm not sure if those are being used for detention. Mark, do you have any other insight on that?
No, no, they're not. We are dealing with, most of our surface runoff is just runoff down to Main Street First. I think I don't want to speak out of turn because I don't have our civil engineer here, our landscape architect as well. But I don't want to commit as well to something that isn't required per code. But I think that we can consider a request.
Mhm. I think it's the responsible thing to do because although you're getting 6 trees instead of the required, what was it, required 2 trees? 6 trees is better, better for our stormwater mitigation, but stormwater is a problem in our city. It truly is, and dumping into Han Creek is, the more work we do towards mitigating impacts on Han Creek, the better off we are. So those are my comments. Thanks so much. Appreciate your work, Mark. Looks great.
Thank you.
Commissioner Morales.
Yeah, just to piggyback on Commissioner Nordstrom in regards to the EV stations, are the locations of those stations set in stone? And if so, do you have, where on the north parking lot are they looking to be located? I guess is my first question.
Great question. They are located on sheet C 2.0 if you guys have access to the printout. Otherwise, I can share my screen really quickly, if that's all right.
My computer didn't print that out very well.
Oh, okay,
Go
sure. No problem. I will share my screen just so everyone is on the same page. All right. So north parking lot, it is these 2 stalls directly adjacent to First Street, right as you come into the building. And they're delineated here with 2 electric vehicle stalls.
And is that 3 parking spots total, including the ADA?
Yes, exactly.
Okay.
The ADA is not electric vehicle parking. It's
Okay.
just the 2 adjacent to it.
No, go ahead. Sorry.
I was just gonna say that the ones to the north of that are just standard stalls. They're not electric vehicle.
Okay. So I guess my question is it unreasonable to put them in that back parking lot in front of the garage? And I only say that because with community members coming and going to pay their bills, they might cross paths with somebody looking to charge their car. I don't know for sure. I thought that the current ones say electric vehicle parking only. I could be wrong. But if there's 2 spots there, I was just thinking it might be, better for the community members coming and going to the office to not be, in someone else's way and them being able to actually park there.
Yeah, I'll say that the location really was determined on the most effective use and most effective construction method for installing them. Right now, they're close to the building, which is cheaper than putting it farther away, if that makes sense. If we locate the electric vehicle stalls farther away, there's just additional conduit additional electrical work that needs to be done to achieve that. So. I don't want to talk about budget though. That comes
Yeah.
Is it specifically distance from the building or distance from that corner of the building where there would be the electrical?
Exactly. Correct. Yep.
And
That's why they're located so close to it.
And since we're putting in bike lanes there on First, because Susie won't let us do this project without them, I'm presuming that's why we're not going to have street side charging alongside the First Street access or First Street facade, correct?
So one thing I will note about the bike lanes is that this is an existing street. So technically they're not required. If the planning commission would like to make that a condition, you may, but I just want to clarify that point, is that this is a different situation than like JR Meadows where, they're building an entire new street. This is an existing street. So per code, they're not technically required to be implemented, but that's if the planning commission would like to condition that, that's an option.
So I guess the question is that parking along North First Street on that's facade of the building? Street parking?
No, First Street does not have First Street does not have street parallel parking.
Okay.
And I would, if I can ask a question, if bike lanes were installed, would that require additional width to First Street to accommodate? Because that would greatly affect the building.
If there's no on-street parking, my concern with the specifics of the bike lanes in that area is that we could, along the frontage of the city property, that makes sense, but then once you get into the area up north of that, it gets a little bit, you know, the width range, the improvements range, there's on-street parking up there, so that's where it gets a little trickier. So that would be my only you know, issue with maybe requiring that, is that really they would only be along First up to pretty much the border of the city property right now, which I'm not sure how much value that adds in this case.
Is there any way we can add some sort of condition to see if the city and council can discuss the budget as to running a straight conduit down to that other parking lot so that EV stations could be installed in that location over up the north parking lot? Yes.
North
directly.
parking lot. Okay, gotcha. Was that a question for me?
Oh, sorry. I guess it would be for Kyle. Is that something that we can request?
Can you repeat just so I can make sure I'm understanding what you're asking?
Just have a condition where this can be taken back to City Hall and the council, whoever discusses the budget for the building, to see if an extra conduit line could be ran to that north parking lot so that the EV stations were in front of the police garage versus the 2 parking spots that will be used for incoming citizens paying their bills and whatnot.
I think if that's something you're interested in, I would just bring it up at council. I don't think that needs to be necessarily attached to this decision. I would just bring that up at a council meeting.
Okay, thank you.
See that Ms. Boquera has got her hand up. Shannon, would you like to provide some input or comment?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I just wanted to talk about the budget just a little bit. As the city council is committed to keeping this building and this new construction within a set number. And so we are already aware, and we've already outlined several features that we will take off the plate of this building to keep it within the budget. That is how committed we are to it. And with rising construction costs, I just want to keep that in mind. I appreciate the request, but I know Mark is hesitating because I have been on him every single week pounding the table about staying within budget. So, and honoring that goal of council, that this does not become the project that the budget keeps expanding and snowballing and becoming so onerous for the community. So I just want to keep that in mind as we go forward with these discussions.
Understood.
I would also add same sentiment for stormwater planters. The goal here being for the project to meet code, and if there are any requests above code that is put into the context of this project staying within the budget that the city manager mentioned, and placing any undue pressure on the project to accommodate that. While we love the recommendation, however, I should state that.
Understood. Thanks.
Do we have any other comments or any thoughts, or do any of the commissioners have an idea about making a motion at this time?
Before making a motion, I have one more. I believe, just since we were talking about budget a little bit, and I don't really want to get into it a whole lot, because I do know that there's been a lot of work on that. And my understanding is that there's even been a fair bit of work to try and get, like Build Back Better funds and things like that to help support this project. And infrastructure money that exists to help pay for it. So it's not just citizen taxes and things like that. And so I know there's a lot of work from city already around these things and the city council and everything, but it's possible that there's, that there are organizations that, in order, like, will actually help pay for things like stormwater mitigation, landscaping, like there are some city grants that the city can get in addition. And again, I know that's asking for extra people's time, and I'm not proposing that we insist on that, but I think, there may be some additional resources that the city could have access to help with some very, very specific kinds of environmental impact things.
Thank you, Commissioner Nordstrom. I see Shannon's hand still raised digitally. Is that just more like waving at us saying hi, Shannon, or do you have any more input to provide?
I just wanted to comment on the Commissioner Nordstrom's notations, is we are actively looking. Monies for a civic building or a governmental building are incredibly difficult to get, and we are still looking. Thus far, unfortunately, we've been unsuccessful because as soon as it's a government building, sometimes it gets excluded for whatever reason. So I am committed to continuing to work. So please hear that. But thus far, we haven't had a lot of success. So I just wanted
I appreciate that. Thank you very much for that comment. I really appreciate that. And I know that you are doing that, and I really appreciate it. And it's just kind of putting it out there again.
All right, Susie, see you've got your actual hand raised.
My actual hand. So Kyle and or Mark, how many bike racks could we get? And still would be within budget? What would be reasonable? And Shannon, you could chime in on this as well. But I really do want to, that really is important to me, and it's important to our community.
Yeah, thank you for the question. I think it's reasonable to accommodate 4. I think that would be easy enough for us to place on the site. The condition of it being covered does give me a little bit of concern because there is additional structure that would be required for that. We do have a landscape zone in front of the building that we might be able to accommodate for additional bike staple parking where you can put 2 aside. There's a substantial width there. The concern at this point was not locating it adjacent to Main Street because of the vehicular speed, and locating it on the back side of the building within our secure kind of parking area. Additionally, that's kind of within the public right of way, and wouldn't be necessarily on our site. So if that's something that the city could accommodate, we might be able to locate additional bike parking stalls there.
Okay, but then we could not attach the additional ones on those other sites to this because it would have nothing to do with this approval tonight. So that we could, the ones that you said that were on the right of way were not
Exactly.
accommodated. Yeah.
Right.
So we could ask for 4 and that wouldn't be unreasonable.
Yes, and I will say that now that we have removed the pad-mounted transformer, there is additional landscaping area that has not been calculated in this proposal. So we might be able to utilize that zone, but we also have been planning for potential future growth along the west parking area to potentially have a shared parking agreement. But I don't want to get too far into that at this point, but we do have other avenues where we could locate bike parking.
Okay. And the striped bike lane, Kyle, is that a huge expense? It doesn't seem like paint would be that expensive, but I
think it's less the expense. I don't know, maybe Shan might have a different thought on this. She's the one who has to deal with it, but it's less the expense than just kind of the logic with where it would end up going once you get past the city property, which is one of the reasons why the code doesn't require it for existing streets. My perspective is that I think it would be good to coordinate something like that throughout kind of the development, and because the street changes width up all the way up there, I'm not sure if it makes a ton of logical sense to me personally to have one just along the frontage there. But it's, you know, that's really a discussion for, you know, whether that's something that makes sense for the city in this case, because it's not a specific requirement for an existing street. But
I mean, I think about the one in front of the grade school, which is equally ridiculous because it's just a short distance along the grade school, but nevertheless, it sets a tone and it sets a precedent so that, you know, the potential is there. People say, oh, there's the bike lane. Oh, well, yeah, let's extend it when we can. So I guess I just feel like it's like planting a seed. That's how I see it. I get it that it's not particularly useful, but around a civic building, it seems like encouraging multimodal transportation is.
yes, I mean, that's something I would throw to Mark and Shannon. Just, is that something that is feasible within the budget, and is that something that we would be able to do? And that would be my only concern is, does that add anything onto the price or something unfeasible onto the actual budget? And then two, is that something that the planning commission wants to condition as a condition COA here?
Okay.
Well, I would again stress, does it have any impacts on the width of our of First Street and where our building is located? We're very much pinched by that 7.5-foot setback for the Collector Street dedication, and being able to fit in, as you can see, I'm going to go ahead and share my screen again real quick, and I realize Shannon has raised her hand again. Are you guys able to see this? To the west part of the property, you can see how close this is. If that needs to move over, that further pinches our our variance request for this curb cut, as well as right now we have adequate driveway width to pull in to that west parking lot. And if the building or the site need to move over at all to accommodate the bike parking, it really throws the design of our site plan into question.
Sure.
The building can move, but the site plan would have to be completely modified.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. Yeah, no, and I don't want to be a stickler on this one because it's just, I get it. It's just, yeah. No, that's good. That makes sense. Thank you.
Shannon. Oh, her hand went down.
Well, I was just going to say is it's not so much the initial cost of the paint, and it depends on what kind of paint you choose, whether it's the thermoelastic that's got the reflective in it, and it's a more expensive than going and painting your house, which is really expensive because I'm doing it right now. But it's more of an annual cost. So the city has striping up for its streets as part of an annual line item in its budget. And so it's adding on to that. So that's just something to think about if, as Kyle says, it's only going to be around the civic building, is do we save that money in anticipation of creating a better biking structure down the road versus having that annual cost of repainting and restriping. So that's just what you weigh as pros and cons. So
Yeah.
I just want to add that.
I just want to say, like, because of all this discussion, I'm okay with not conditioning it. And I also do think that this is part of the long-term city plan, right? We're in this process of coming up with like the long-term plan. And I think, if the citizens through this say, hey, pedestrian and bikes are really important, then it becomes part of Carleton's long-term plan of how do we do that. And so I kind of think that if it's important to us, we go to those meetings and we talk about, and we fill out the surveys. We make this part of a long-term real plan for the city, as opposed to just a building project for City Hall. And I get Susie, like, you do it sets a precedent, but I also think there's other ways to do this in a more global way for Carleton. And I think it's okay to let this go and keep pushing the global, global planning process for our city.
Yeah, no, I get it. I won't be a stickler on that one. The bike parking, maybe, I would like to condition it on four bike parking, at least 4.
And, I think bike parking, like, what kinds of bike racks you use. I mean, those vary, costs vary on all those things, but we have those really cool bike parking things around Carlton that have different like businesses or community things. And I don't know how those were done, like whether people donated money to have, I have no idea how those were done, but I'm totally fine with something really simple and straightforward. But I also think if it comes down to like, hey, we have a new space like that, where that transformer was going to be, maybe we can get community donations to put in some kind of cool Carlton-y thing. I mean, that's another kind of approach that's a little bit longer term maybe, but part of it. I don't know. I'm just trying to think creatively about how we do this as a community, as opposed to how do we do this on the city's budget.
No, I don't mind committing city funds to multimodal transportation options. I think it's important for everybody. I think it's a benefit. I think it's a total benefit for the community.
Susie, I think you got to make your way to the city council. You can see you have some control of the purse strings.
Yeah.
We need you on the purse string.
No. Oh, well, okay. I'm all done with my talking now. Thank you.
Right. It sounds like we're not adding a condition with respect to bike lanes and with respect to bike parking spaces. Am I understanding that the goal is to shift that number from 2 to 4?
Wait, yeah, shift the number of bike parking from 2 to 4.
Okay, it sounds like that would be the only supplemental condition and variation from what has been proposed by the excellent Mr. Jenkins. Does that sound good to everybody?
Yes.
In which case, as your chair, I can't make, but I'm happy to receive a motion. And you might find inspiration at the bottom of page 85, top of page 86.
I move that we approve the requests and adopt the findings and conditions contained in the staff report, including the addition that Kyle's going to add that was not contained in this packet, along with changing the bike parking from 2 to 4.
But just to clarify, those are file numbers SDR 2022-02 and variance 2022-02. Just so we have that.
Okay, that part.
All right, we have a motion with the appropriate amendment with respect to bike parking spaces and of course, the inclusion of Kyle's documentation for the variance. We are waiting for a second.
I second.
And we got a second, so we can now all vote. Jennifer?
Aye.
High five the sky. Susie?
Yes.
Another high five in the sky. Gabe?
Aye.
There you go, the aye and an aye from me. It passes unanimously. Mr. Jenkins will proceed with the final notice of decision with staff for the city. And look at that, guys. We still have another 40 minutes to play. With that, I'd like to just open the floor for the citizen comments that were not present earlier. Is there anybody, Ms. Shelton in City Hall, who's been itching to talk to us about their basket weaving or other hobbies?
There are currently no citizens present at City Hall.
Oh man, I got to talk to some citizens about it coming. With that, any other commissioners have any comments or new business? I had one, if you don't mind, I'll just say it quickly, and that is because I was gone last month. I'd second my appreciation of Bob Graham for his years of service to the Planning Commission. I was appreciative that he filled in for me last month, and he will be missed. And I don't know, since Amy's not here, if we have any status on the process of obtaining another Planning Commission member, so we are not so skinny on quorum. But perhaps, Mr. Jenkins, if you could pass that along to Amy to let us know, maybe for just a brief update next month, that'd be much appreciated. Other than that, I have no other comments for the evening. Anybody else?
I just want to appreciate all my fellow commissioners. Great questions, everybody. Thank you. Thanks for thinking hard, working hard. Thanks, Mark, for your great design. I really think it's beautiful. Thanks, Kyle, for always being so patient with me. Good night.
Thank you, Susie. Jennifer?
I'm good, thanks.
Gabe, I trust there's nothing that's itching to come out this week?
No, sir. But
All
I
right.
wanted to say it is a great design and go Bruins.
With that, does anybody want to move and second us for adjournment?
I move to adjourn.
Second.
We got double seconds, so we got fourths. All in favor saying aye, and we're gonna
Aye.
call it a night. Thanks,
Aye.
everybody. Have a great night.
Bye.
We'll see you next month. Everybody, bye-bye.